Hey everyone, my name is Adi, and in today's tutorial we will talk about how to paint trees, and we will try different techniques of watercolor. I talked about watercolor material in another video, so I will leave a link in the description below if you wish to check it out. Let's start. I call this technique color blocking. I don't know if it has another name. For this technique I use watercolor with just a little bit water. So the paint is pretty vivid and opaque. I create areas of color as the groups of leaves. I make sure that it's not too organized. I start with a light color and place other colors beside it. You need to decide where the lights come from. In this case, I made the direction of the light come from the upper left corner. So the upper left side of the groups of the leaves will be in lighter color. By using different colors in different level of darkness and lightness, it suggests that there is a volume. The lower right side will be darker. I see many people use this technique. It is really suitable when painting outside, because you can get a good result pretty fast. You can also see that I kept some areas white between the leaves. It is called negative space. Space where there is nothing, and it is trapped between another thing. We can't really see all the details, and sometimes the branches that are connected to the leaves disappear, so that you just see the leaves that come out from the general shape. This is why I create dots that are separated. You can make the branches and the trunk before or after the leaves. Just keep in mind that you can't really paint with a light color over dark color when using watercolors. I am making the branches and the trunk in a dark brown. When creating the branches, it is good to make the lines disconnected. That way you can suggest that sometimes the branches are inside the groups of leaves and sometimes they go out. The branches get thinner the further they get away from the trunk. Let's start this time with the branches and trunk. I am creating disconnected lines for the branches. I will fill the distances between them with leaves later on. To get a better control over your brush and to be able to create thin lines, dip the tip of the brush in color and paint when you hold the brush 90 degrees to the paper. To make the trunk and branches look like they have volume, add darker lines at the part that is far from the light. Now I am going to use a sponge. Place the color you want on the palette and dip the sponge in the color. Press the sponge on the paper to paint with it. How much pressure you use when you press will affect how it will turn out. Also, the amount of water you use can affect the result. Don't use too much water because you will lose the effect. You don't have to make it cohesive. You can get variation by applying different pressure every time and using different amount of water. By using sponge we can make it feel like there is texture and details. Add dark color to create the illusion of depth. Adding drops of color can work really well too when painting trees. To do it, dip your brush in enough color and water, and when you hold it above your painting, bang it. I did the drops of color while the rest of the foliage was still wet, so it blended seamlessly. I also add a bush. I want to show you the next technique from close-up first. I am pushing the brush onto the paper. That way the hair of the brush is dividing and it creates unique shapes. I'm holding the brush in about 90 degrees to the paper. I sometimes use this technique while holding more than one brush. It's better not to use your favorite brush for this technique because it could destroy it over time. Let's talk more about painting trees. It's better not to make them too organized or too symmetrical because they are natural objects. When we look at things that have many details like foliage, hair, etc., our eyes can't notice everything. We never stop and count how many leaves there are on a tree. Many details are lost in the general shape. So you don't have to paint all the leaves on a tree, all the lines in someone's face. Just by adding some leaves, it can make us interpret the rest as leaves too. We can also suggest that there are leaves. So you can paint a tree with leaves without actually paint the leaves, like in the techniques in this video. If you are going to make a painting of a view and you want to add trees that don't take all the focus, then maybe less can be more. The next time you want to add trees to your painting, you can come back to this video and choose from these techniques the one that you think is the most suitable to the painting you want to create. By using different sizes of brushes, you can have shapes in different sizes. Let's paint 2 trees side by side this time. And we will use salt for this painting. First we paint the tree and we will add salt later on. The color that you use has to be wet enough. It has to be mixed with water so that the salt will give an effect. When I paint the trees, I make the lines go in different directions. They are thinner the farther they go out. Table salt and cooking salt create different effects. You can use whichever one that you prefer or mix them both like I did. I put them on randomly. But you can be more strategic and control where they will be. You can even decide that different sections will get a different salt, so it will feel like they have different texture or something different about them. Because the color is kind of watery, I can create lines by pulling the paint that I already placed and stretch it in different directions with my brush. Because the color is wet enough, you can work wet to wet and add another color to the first color while it's still wet. That way they can blend on the paper. Just by making one of the trees darker than the other, I can suggest that they hide one another, and that one of them is in front of the other. If you look at mountains, you will see that they tend to get more blue the further they are away. I was inspired by this when creating these trees. I made the tree on the back bluer. I will also make the tree darker when it is closer to the other tree. This is something that I often do in watercolor painting to show depth. Whenever there are two things that one is in the front of the other, I use dark color where they meet and I let it gradually disappear. The salt can create an effect that suggests that there are details. But I also wanted to use different colors to suggest depth, that the tree is three-dimensional and there is light and shadow to it. After the color is completely dry, you can take the salt off and enjoy the special effect the salt created. You can take each of these techniques and use it in different subjects, in different ways. You can experiment with each of the techniques and find how to make it your own technique. You can also choose to use whichever colors that you like. You don't have to use the same colors that I used. Let's move on to the fifth painting and the final tree of this video. We are going to use wet into wet technique. So first we need to wet our paper. I use a brush with water and go over the places where I want the leaves to be, or blossom in this case. The next step is to touch the wet areas with a brush with color. I let the color spread and do whatever it wants. I think that for beginners, the fact that the color acts on its own can be intimidating. But this is the magic of watercolor, and you can achieve this dreamy effect that you can't achieve in any other way. When I bought my watercolor pack, I asked myself, why do they put a white watercolor in it? Because you can't use it over another color, and because the paper is white. I do use the white when mixing color. You can make a color lighter by adding more water to it, but it will be watery. So if you want to create an opaque light pink, for example, then you can mix red with the white watercolor. I am going to add drops of color in the same way that I did in the trees that I painted with a sponge. When painting the trunk, I start on a part of the paper that is dry, and I move on to the areas that are wet. So I have more control at first, but when I move on to the areas that are wet, it will become part of the wet into wet and blend in with the rest of the painting. Now you can use your creativity to make your own trees. I created an Instagram hashtag, Draw&PaintTime, as one word without spaces or anything. So you can share your artworks if you wish to. And I hope that in time it will become a platform for you to see what other people who watch this channel create. And if you want to challenge yourself and to make sure you practice every week, I recommend to paint together with me. So you can listen to the explanation while you practice, and so you will try new things, different to what you usually do. Thank you so much for watching, and for your likes and comments. See you soon. Bye bye.